Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify or wherever you listen. It's Monday the 7th of July. I'm Caroline Hepke in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, Trump's tariff wall hits the BRICS. The US president announces an additional 10% levy on any country aligning with the group of nations.
OPEC Plus agrees to pump even more oil into a market that's widely expected to be oversupplied in the months ahead.
And after a year of Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, UK businesses are struggling to see what's pro-business about Labour.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
US President Donald Trump says he will impose an additional 10% tariff on any country aligning itself with what he called the anti-American policies of BRICS. The group of nations, which includes Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, held a summit over the weekend where leaders condemned American and Israeli attacks on Iran and called on Israel to withdraw troops from the Gaza Strip. Donald Trump's comments in a Truth Social post come as the US prepares to send tariff letters to dozens of countries in the coming days, with the administration's 90-day pause on higher duties set to expire on Wednesday. President Trump says most nations will have a deal or letter by then. Here he is speaking alongside Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick.
There are going to be tariffs. The tariffs are going to be the tariffs. I think we'll have most countries done by July 9th, yeah. Either a letter or a deal.
But they go into effect on August 1st. The tariffs go into effect August 1st, but the president is setting the rates and the deals right now.
That's Donald Trump and Howard Lutnick, as the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent signalled that some countries without deals in place could have more time to negotiate before the fresh tariffs come into force on the 1st of August.
EU-based companies are now blocked from bidding for certain medical device procurement contracts over a value of $6.3 million as the trade standoff between the EU and China escalates. China enacted the measures over the weekend as a response to a similar planned EU ban. The country also announced anti-dumping duties on European brandy last week. The European Commission says that China's exports of medical devices to the EU have more than doubled between 2015 and 2023. The moves mark a hardening of both sides' stances towards foreign goods as Beijing is locked in a trade war with the US.
82 people are now known to have died in Texas following flash floods across the US state. That includes 27 people at a girls' summer camp in Kerr County, which says the tragedy on Friday morning has devastated their community. 10 children and a counsellor at a Camp Mystic remain unaccounted for as rescuers frantically continue to try to find survivors. Here is Kerr County Sheriff Larry Letha.
There's over 400 first responders for more than 20 agencies that are working in Kerr County. We have more than a dozen canine working in and near the river. More than 100 air, water and ground vehicles are in the field right now working on this search and rescue.
Kerr County Sheriff Larry Letha speaking there as authorities warned the casualty count will climb as more rain is forecast, increasing the risk of further flash floods in the coming days.
Oil prices have fallen after OPEC Plus agreed to a bigger than expected production increase from next month. The group, led by Saudi Arabia, decided on Saturday to increase supply by 548,000 barrels per day. Officials cited summer demand as one reason for their optimism that the extra barrels could be absorbed by the market. But Lombard Odier's Asia CIO John Woods says he isn't so sure.
With the growth outlook for developed and developing markets all ticking lower, it's hard to see where that demand is going to start accelerating materially. The only way, therefore, that price can be influenced and manipulated is more through supply. But as we saw in the recent announcement, there are clearly motivations on behalf of the Saudis to boost supply.
Lombard Odier's John Woods referring there to some of the reasons for the supply increase, including punishing overproduction by some members and clawing back market share from US shale producers.
The UK government is talking down hopes of further benefits changes as the Prime Minister Keir Starmer seeks to hold the line on spending. Many Labour Party figures had hoped that they could push the government into scrapping a cap on claiming benefits for more than 2 children. But Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson said the U-turn on disability cuts would have fiscal consequences.
The decision we've taken in the last week has come at a cost, yes, and the fiscal rules that we have matter. We are seeing green shoots. Of course, we see record levels of business confidence. We see more jobs being created, and we've seen interest rates come down. So those are all big and important changes.
In contrast to Phillipson's words, a survey from the Confederation of British Industry showed business optimism falling at its steepest pace in September 2022 when Liz Truss took office. The rift inside the Labour Party over spending has put the government on course to raise taxes or borrow more in its upcoming budget.
In the US, Donald Trump has blasted Elon Musk's bid to start a new political party as the feud between the two former allies deepens. A day after the US president's tax-cutting bill was signed into law, Musk announced that he would start a new America party. Trump says it's, quote, sad to watch Elon Musk go completely off the rails. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told CNN the Tesla CEO should stick to his business.
The principles of Doge were very popular. I think if you looked at the polling, Elon was not. So I believe that the boards of directors at his various companies wanted him to come back and run those companies, which he is better at than anyone. So I imagine that those board of directors did not like this announcement yesterday and will be encouraging him to focus on his business activities, not his political activities.
The negative reaction from those in the White House will likely further isolate Musk from any contact with the Oval Office. The development has further unnerved Tesla investors, with the company's stock expected to take a hit when trading opens, despite already falling 20% so far this year. So those are a few of our top stories for you this morning. In terms of the markets right now, the dollar is down on the dollar spot index this morning. The Bloomberg dollar spot index up, though, 0.2%. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index is in retreat, down 0.7%. In terms of stock futures, also for Europe, just slightly in the green, but we're down 0.4% for the S&P 500 E-mini futures. We did see European equities retreat last week, both for the FTSE and for the Euro Stoxx 600, because of more tariff uncertainty, and that is still lingering in markets. The unknown, yet another deadline from the Trump administration. 10-year US Treasury yields trading down 2 basis points at 4.33, and oil prices, Brent crude, down 0.4 this morning. Those are the markets.
In a moment, we'll bring you the latest on Donald Trump's tariff threats, plus look at how business leaders in the UK are feeling about the Labour government 1 year in. But another story that caught our eye this morning. Caroline, do you actually know what rococo is? It's one of those words that gets bandied about a lot, but I didn't realise until this morning that I didn't really know what it meant.
I think I would know when I see it, and to be honest, I love it. And I was reminded of it recently on a gallery visit, that there is actually even an English rococo style, even though it's largely European.
Yeah, like associated with pre-revolutionary France, I learned from reading Fergus O'Sullivan's piece this morning about how, essentially, because it's a word that's been bandied about a lot to describe Donald Trump's style. In fact, Kate Wagner of the blog McMansion Hell, one I need to add to my reading list, dubbed the presidential look regional car dealership rococo. But in case you're delving into this, isn't it? In case you're delving into this, Fergus has done that for us, essentially, and said that we shouldn't let a polarising political figure malign the good name of this frequently understood European style. It is something that has, as you say, associations for all of us in terms of being perhaps a little bit over the top, but very gilded. And Fergus has this fascinating analysis of the Gilded Age style in the US and how all of this, essentially, when he tried to put it together to inform what Donald Trump's design style is, because it is his own, how it's perhaps better to look to the Gilded Age in the US than to rococo for hints of where his inspirations come from.
Yeah, it's a really interesting read. It's sort of architecture, art meets, you know, what is the kind of modern presidency now in the US. Because the interesting thing also is that President Trump has renovated the White House actually again in this second administration. So yeah, looking at the kind of style and what it means and the historical context, I thought was so interesting. Yeah,
and you can read that piece on Bloomberg.com. We'll put a link to it in our podcast show notes. Well, when the Labour Party came to power in the UK a year ago, business leaders decided to give Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves a chance to forge a new and stronger relationship. But the past 12 months have seen tax hikes on employers, market jitters, and recent talk that Britain's biggest listed company, AstraZeneca, might defect from the London Stock Exchange. So how should we think about Labour's relationship with business now? Our UK economy reporter Irina Angel joins us now for more. Irina, good morning. Now, Labour courted business for a long time running up to last year's election, but how much have things soured in the past 12 months?
Morning, Stephen. Well, as you said, business leaders were ready to give Labour a chance to forge a strong relationship 1 year ago, after the chaos of Brexit and the Tory years. But that optimism was really quickly replaced with warnings of job cuts and more businesses going bust. And that was after the government lifted employment taxes in its first budget. So that sentiment that Labour is not pro-business was then exacerbated by talks that AstraZeneca, as you mentioned, might move its primary listing to New York. But it was really that budget that was the big reset moment. It was a shock move that blindsided CEOs who had thought they had a good relationship with Labour up to that point.
Yeah, and so then the current status of the relationship, I mean, how annoyed are they?
Well, that increase in employment taxes, it's led to large-scale job cuts. Businesses have cut payrolls by 250,000 since October, and also delayed investment, so that's still the big pain point. And last week's market turmoil following Rachel Reeves' emotional appearance in Parliament, Prime Minister Keir Starmer's move to water down planned welfare reforms, these were seen as new signs that the party is walking on thin ice with businesses. However, there are some signs that things are starting to improve. We had, the long-awaited industrial strategy launched by the government, the grand vision for growing the economy, which was commended by business leaders for taking a long-term view. And then we had some closely watched surveys showing that, private sector activity expanded at the fastest pace in 9 months. And then we have hiring intentions up again, which all of these are very positive signs. And of course, the tariff damage is less than feared so far. So that's one to watch out.
Thinking about where things go from here, Irina, I mean, what are the biggest concerns that business leaders have now, and are they worried about that their relationship could get worse with the government?
Well, the biggest concerns would be red tape, non-doms, migration, tax. AstraZeneca, they've been very vocal about the frustration with the UK's regulatory regime for medicines. And, in January, they abandoned plans to invest in a UK vaccine manufacturing plant. Then we have Labour's abolition of the non-doms tax regime, which led to many business leaders leaving the country altogether. The migration rules changes. Starmer has clamped down on visas to counter the threat from the UK Reform Party on the right, but that's made it more difficult for businesses to source the right talent. And then, of course, tax. There are still worries about what will happen in the next budget and whether Labour will raise taxes on business again. That being said, there are still signs that the relationship could be mended. It's never going back to where it was last year. Businesses have learned their lesson. But, the key is for Labour to make businesses feel like their views are understood and taken into account, not just listened to and then ignored.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll have to see what happens then going forward, and how much, the government can win back that business support. Irina, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Our UK economy reporter, Irina Angel.
Let's bring you the latest now on trade tariffs. And Donald Trump has threatened an additional levy on countries that support what he calls the anti-American policies of the BRICS group. Our news desk editor Jill Deesis joins us now for more. Jill, who exactly is Trump targeting with this latest threat, and why?
Well, Stephen, I don't think that we've got a ton of information yet, and Trump has notably not exactly elaborated on what he means by anti-American policies. That being said, I would say that if you're looking at BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, many of its sort of associate nations, I'm really interested in what this may mean for talks with India, for example. I mean, the Indian government has been pretty aggressively trying to nail down a trade deal with the United States ahead of this July 9th deadline. That's the 90 days past Trump's Liberation Day on those reciprocal tariffs that he was talking about. That seems to be one of the more interesting ones here. Now, an additional 10% tariff, again, not entirely clear which types of policies he's talking about, though I would point out that, this weekend, BRICS leaders were meeting. They did condemn U.S. and Israeli attacks on Iran. I don't know if that's factoring in. And then I would also say that, fairly, in the past, Trump has threatened to slap, levies as high as 100% on BRICS if they ditched the U.S. dollar in bilateral trade. So I'm not sure if that factors in as well, but I think certainly a really interesting development to look out for. And again, I'm really interested in how exactly this may weigh on India, for example.
Yes, that is interesting. But then there's also the idea of another deadline. We heard from both the Treasury Secretary and the Commerce Secretary over the weekend. So they pointed to August 1st as perhaps more important in terms of being a deadline than the 9th of July for tariff deals. So is it an extension or not?
I think that at this point, the Trump administration probably reluctant to say that this is, any kind of a muddling of the deadline or an extension of the deadline. They still have said that they want to get everything sorted by July 9th. But yeah, the fact that nothing's kicking in until August 1st does indicate that maybe there's some time to, continue to negotiate over the next couple of weeks. That being said, the way that Trump works is obviously a mystery, much of the time to many of us. It was just last week that he, proposed this idea of sending out letters to various nations with, specific trade, tariff numbers on there. He did say that continues to be a factor, that he's going to be sending out letters over the next couple of days. So I do think that it kind of opens up this idea of, if you are a country that receives one of those letters, does that still mean that you've got time to negotiate ahead of August 1st? I think, as with a lot of things, Donald Trump, anything kind of goes in Trump's world. He really likes to make deals. He really wants to come out on top. So I do think just that sort of that letter component to this does, open the door of, maybe that's a final rate for some of these places, but maybe Trump thinks that, if they negotiate and if whatever he determines to be good faith, there could still be some negotiations beyond July 9th up to that August 1st deadline.
And Scott Bessent also hinting over the weekend they are expecting a flurry of deals to be done in the coming days as well. What are the key negotiations to watch then as we're getting towards the at least first of those deadlines?
Yeah, there's a few that I'm really looking out for. I think India, as we've previously discussed, I really think, that's one that we could potentially see some movement on fairly soon. I'm also looking out for, some others in Southeast Asia. We did get at least, Trump saying there was a deal with Vietnam last week, although we still haven't seen a term sheet for that one yet. So that's, one that I'm looking out for. Cambodia suggested that they've reached some kind of an agreement with the U.S. government, although, again, still waiting for further details there. And then the ones that I'm really curious about too, further North Asia or South Korea and Japan. I think Japan in particular, really curious. The auto tariffs, those sectoral tariffs on auto parts has been a really big, sort of sticking point with Japan and the U.S. on this one. Trump has kind of indicated that, that's not something that's necessarily up for negotiation. The Japanese Prime Minister Ishiba, he's recently speaking, saying that the country's prepared for all possible tariff scenarios. It does seem like they've had some difficulty getting something over the line. So I think anything that's coming, particularly on Japan, if they're able to reach a deal, would be something really, really curious to watch.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.